It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, you've got thousands of striking workers in the streets walking the picket lines. You've got the Writers Guild. You've got the SAG-AFTRA folks. You've got the UAW people now entering their first week of strikes. Big time in America. And understand, this historically could be one of those moments that in 20, 30, 50 years, the next generation looks back on and goes, hey, that was important. That made our lives better. Much like we look back on the Flint sit-down strikes, we look at my grandparents' generation, coming back from fighting fascism overseas to fighting it on the shop floor and creating the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. They did that by doing, well, exactly what we're seeing right now. People taking to the streets, making demands, and fighting for better opportunities. And not just wages, hours, conditions. One of the big things with this UAW strike is the next generation of jobs. Will those jobs be UAW union jobs? Will those jobs pay decent wages? Will they have decent benefits? Will they have some bit of say? This is the central moment. Much like I've been saying, the SAG-AFTRA strike is all about the future of the profession. Will studios be able to take your picture and use it forever? Will they be able to AI your voice and never pay you ever again? We're on the front lines of the revolution of what the future will be. And also, I think as a country, at a time when income and wealth inequality is greater than it's probably been in, at least in my lifetime, or at least the last 100 years, probably ever, people are saying enough. And the anger level, and I had the opportunity over the weekend to talk to a couple of striking UAW workers, union member to union member, and the anger is there. The wages have been stagnant and declining for 30, 40 years. The benefits are getting worse, and the work is getting longer, more forced over, all kinds of stuff that people are they've hit the pinnacle. Coming out of the pandemic when, they were, hey, we're all essential, right? We're all frontline heroes. But we're not paid like that. We're not treated like that. And I think we're in a moment where working people have got to shake themselves awake from what has been the last 30, 40 years of, I'm just happy to have a job, don't want to rock the boat, to, damn it, my work creates enormous amounts of wealth. I had a listener over the weekend send me a story from an old 1930s UAW publication where it's quite hysterical, actually. Where, somebody, the boss is yelling at the worker, hey, hurry up. And somebody goes, why are you yelling at that guy? He goes, because I pay him. And he's like, well, how much do you pay him? He goes, like $4. And the guy goes, well, how much do you make? He goes, 10. And he goes, so what you're telling me is that guy's paying you $6 to tell him to yell at him, to tell him to hurry up? And that's kind of an interesting take on it, because we've been sold that we need to honor the employer without reciprocation. Understand, without workers, the employer doesn't make profit. And without the employer, the workers don't. So there's got to be this moment where you work together and you share in the prosperity that the work of those laborers creates. Now, you go, but they knew when they took the job. A lot of them took the job when the industry was struggling, because guess what? What the industry does well is when times are tough, they come back and they beg. Oh, we're going to go broke. But the fact of the matter is, over the last couple of years, the big three automakers have pocketed $250 billion in profit. The first 6 months of this year, $21 billion in profit. They're buying back their stocks at $5 billion. So you're telling me they don't have any money. Sorry, we're poor. The CEO of Ford said, if we give them what they want, we'll go bankrupt. How about you just don't give all of that to the shareholders and to yourself? Because what I find ironic, and this is hysterical to me, I find it just mind-blowingly hysterical that people who are making $22, $25, and $29 million are telling people who are making $16 an hour, we can't give you a raise. We can't give you the same percentage raise that we took for ourselves. I find that utterly hysterical. And every working person in this country should be infuriated by that because it's played out multiple times. Mary Barra does not put any tires on any car. She doesn't secure the hood or she probably doesn't even know how. And this is where I found it interesting that Sean Fain said, look, if you're going to give all this money to the shareholders and to the very wealthy, maybe you can teach them to make the cars. Because they're kind of tired of it. And that's the sense I got when I talked to these folks over the weekend. They're tired of the abuse. They're tired of the low wages. They're tired of it. And we're in this moment where I think workers have had enough. Now, I got an interesting question over the weekend. Is Joe Biden responsible for this strike? And I had to think about it long and hard. And I've come up with, yes, he is. Moving us towards EVs as quickly as, yes, that's now on the table. That's now important. Being the most pro-union president in the history of our country, absolutely. I think that has encouraged people, emboldened people a little bit, but not as much as you might think. I think people were ticked off coming out of the pandemic, and the anger is real. Other question, should Joe Biden walk the picket line? I say yes. I say every politician should adopt a striker, just like I say every working person should adopt a striker. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Eric Loomis is going to be here to share some thoughts on the historical perspective of this strike. He is the author of A History of America in 10 Strikes, a must-read for every working person. Quick break. Right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Unions are making a comeback. More organizing in the last couple of years than in a long time. And the Biden administration being more supportive of unions than any president since FDR. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
So as we've been talking about, this strike, this UAW strike could be one of those game changers. You never know in the moment. And I look at what Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, said last week. He said, look, this is our generation's defining moment. And he says, look, they're ready to stand up and they're ready to fight and demand better, to take on, just corporate greed at such a high level. And even more than that, as we've been talking about, which got me to thinking, maybe we should look historically at what these strikes have been able to accomplish, what they've meant, and maybe we could be living a bit of history. And that's why I've asked my good friend Eric Loomis to come talk with us. Eric is the author of A History of America in 10 Strikes, the book every working person should, must, and absolutely has to read and have on their bookshelf. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, could this be the defining moment of a generation, as Sean Fain says?
Well, it could be. I mean, I don't think anybody's really aware at the moment in which it's happening what the defining moment is. The history of social movements, whether we're talking about strikes or other social movements, is filled with things that seemingly happen out of nowhere. And then it becomes a bigger deal later. But I would say this, that, it's very clear that the UAW is striking not just for, the wages and things, and getting getting rid of the two-tier wage structure, and those sorts of very concrete things. But it's quite clear that they're striking for the future of industrial labor in America. And it's happening at a moment in which there's a lot of concern over things like automation. There's the issue of where the electric vehicles are going to be built, and will they be built under the union structure. And I think that this is a moment in which it's quite clear that this is going to set the groundwork for what's going to come, not just over the life of this contract that will eventually be signed, but over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I think that they're very aware of what's happened to the UAW and to unions generally in the last couple of decades, and they're looking to take advantage of the current era of sort of labor upheaval and to really make some concrete gains, not only for their members, but try to reset the framework of collective bargaining generally right now. So, the answer is, of course, that we can't know, but I think there's a reason to think that Fain and other UAW leaders and the rank and file are all pretty aware that this might well be, and they have to act as such.
Now, in your book, The History of America and 10 Strikes, 2 of those 10 that you point out are UAW strikes. You get the sit-down strikes of the 30s, and in the 70s you had the Lordstown strike that went on. And those really did change the direction of the country. I think in the sit-down strike, very positive ways. I guess in both very positive ways. Walk us through, that sit-down era. Do you think those people knew that they were fighting for the future of work, and they were fighting to create what became the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, or were they just fighting to survive the next day?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, I think that those activists in the 1930s certainly had a historical vision. They certainly saw themselves as the vanguard of a working class that they hoped would take over America. And probably more than it actually did, although certainly they benefited themselves, and all the other auto workers benefited from the kind of gains that they made. But, when they're acting to engage in the sit-down strike, I mean, they're seeking to force the auto companies to bargain really for the first time ever. And so they're certainly aware that if this works, it's going to change the entire nature of collective bargaining, change the historical trajectory of auto workers and industrial laborers in America, which is, of course, exactly what it does, right? And so the moment in which in which General Motors signs that initial agreement recognizing recognizing the UAW as the bargaining agent of the workers, this is a watershed moment in American history, not just labor history, but American history, because for the first time, one of these gigantic auto plants, which, remember, at the time, employed tens of thousands of people in some of these plants, that for the first time, that these workers were going to have collective representation and going to be able to take their demands to the company and expect that there's going to be some reciprocation there, and that those demands are going to be met. And so whether they saw, to the extent they saw themselves at the very moment of changing the trajectory of working class history, at the moment that GM caves, they certainly know that they've changed working class history.
And that benefited, people across the board, because I've had some folks reach out and go, well, why do I care about this? It's just going to make... The response I'm getting from my MAGA hat wearing friends is it's just going to make cars more expensive. And I'm like, no, it's going to help raise the, that rising tide thing. This is how that tide rises when workers share in the profits that their labor creates. And maybe this sends a wave across not just the auto industry, but all industry.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, in part, do we want workers to be able to afford the cars that they make, right? And if they're making $16 an hour, which, so the starting wage for some of these UAW, some of these auto workers now is lower. California just passed a $20 minimum wage for restaurant workers. It's lower than these restaurant workers' minimum wage now in California. This is not a good wage. And we've seen the slow rolling back of the kind of gains the UAW made. And this is a big reason why they are making such broad-based demands at this time, because they see what's been happening. They see this is going to continue to happen, that the purchasing power of working class people is going to continue to decline. And so, they're trying to make a big stake against all three companies at once to try to reverse that. And, the issue of whether or not it makes cars more expensive, I think that this is a kind of common thing, but that people who oppose unions or labor regulations say. But, it is worth noting that, a lot of the reason for the expensive cars is the choices that the companies make as well on top of this. The kind of cars that they choose to make, the kind of pricing that they choose to engage in, and if people want to talk about cars being super expensive, let's also remember that the big three in the U.S. have largely given up the small car market entirely based on their own choices. So there's a lot of reasons why cars may be expensive today. Higher wages for workers, yes, can contribute. But of all things, that's the one reason that we should be supportive of cars being a little more expensive, to know that those workers are going to pour all that money back into the economy, and it's going to help every single worker in America.
No, and this is, for me, this is what I see this being, you, the historian, maybe can help me through this. What I see this possibly being able to do is wake up a working class that I've said is suffered from Stockholm syndrome for the last 40 years. As the work we do, wages have been stagnant, benefits have been declining, pensions have been eviscerated. Things have gotten worse for working people, and the anger out there is real. So when you see, these big three who pocketed $250 billion in profit over the last several years, $21 billion in profit the first 6 months of this year. They're doing $5 billion in stock buybacks. When you see all of this money that's flowing to the handful of shareholders and CEOs and our oligarchy, I'm hoping this is that shake awake moment where you go, no, the prices don't have to go up. Maybe the money we give to the people at the very top, maybe that goes down a little bit.
Right. I think it's a lot of this kind of Stockholm syndrome that you talk about, is a response, I think, of a kind of a decline in this country of solidarity, even among various parts of the working class, that everybody's kind of looking out for themselves a little bit. And so, the first concern that many people, including even often many other union members, might have when, say, the auto workers go on strike is, how's this going to impact me? And thinking just in terms of their personal consumer choices, right? Not even in terms of the kind of bigger picture in which, a stronger labor movement is going to help everybody. And so I think we need to really reinvigorate the idea of solidarity, the idea of mutual aid, the idea of having each other's backs, and the idea that, as goes the major unions in this country, so goes the rest of the American working class. Especially when you only have 10% of American workers unionized at this point, that the unions oftentimes are setting wage and benefits rates even for non-union plants, and so if they don't have the power to do that, then it's going to hurt every single worker in this country. And I think that people whose first thought is, well, I was going to go buy this my new truck, and now I might have to wait. You know what? Maybe that's okay. Maybe there are bigger things that you should be considering right now.
No, you've hit on something I've been asking for the longest time. What are you first? Are you a consumer or are you a worker first? How do you view yourself in this economy? And sadly, most people I know view themselves as consumers. Like you said, how's this going to affect me? Instead of how's it going to make life better for working people? It's, hey, hooray for me. And that's troublesome.
Yeah, there's no space in that world for any kind of solidarity. And moreover, when you are needing, if you're a Teamster, you're a, IBEW member, SEIU, whatever it may be, I mean, if you're not coming out and actively supporting other workers when they're in a situation that they're making bigger demands, why are they going to support you when you make your demands? Yep. They're not going to, right? That at the core of what solidarity means is not, I want you to do what I want you to do. It's literally mutual aid. Like that's the root of this. It's the idea that we as workers are going to assist each other to build up the collective power of the working class. And so I think it's really important to say, how can I help support this struggle?
This is why I've been saying for the longest time, every politician should adopt a striker, and every working person should find a picket line and adopt a striker. Walk with them for a day, bring a pizza, a box of donuts, I don't know, anything, some water, whatever. Maybe throw a buck in the collection fund to help people get through this, because their victory will be all of ours if we can begin to turn the tide on what has been just massive, not even shameful corporate greed. And begin to redistribute wealth, kind of like my grandparents' generation did.
Yeah, and this is why I think that the UAW is so historically minded in this current struggle, because they're aware of this, they see the future, and they also see the present inequality, and that's why I think tying their own wage gains to the gains made by corporate leaders in the last several years is a very smart rhetorical move. Because they're pointing out that these CEOs continue to get these just skyrocketing salaries, and it's coming on the back of the workers. And so now the workers want theirs, right? The union members, they want theirs, and they want to, and they also they want to continue to have an active and powerful UAW. They want those electric vehicles to be built under the union master contract. They want to grow. And they want the companies to respect them as an organization. And I think that, part of what they're doing here is trying to turn the tide on the last 40 years of American history, right? Ever since Reagan fired the air traffic controllers in 81, it's been an open warfare on American unions. And, UAW leadership is trying to reverse that. And they are truly backed by an angry and activated workforce. That this is a strike in which the rank and file is not begrudgingly going out. Like they want to strike, they want to push back, and I think that's part of the reason why this strike is so important for the rest of us, because it really is tapping in to the general anger in which many Americans, and the vast majority of which are not union members, feel about the contemporary economy. Well, this is a group of workers that have the agency and the ability and the organization to actually take the fight to corporate America, which is why we need to support them.
And I'm right there with you. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because this is again another one of those moments where you go, a victory helps move all of us forward. I'm looking at the administration. You've got the president who's, some say is the most pro-labor president. Well, at least he's the most pro-labor president of my lifetime thus far. How responsible is he for this, and should he walk the picket line?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I mean, you have Michigan politicians saying, maybe it's better for him to stay away. At the same time, he certainly wants to signal that he is pro-union, and he is pro-union. Now, we can disagree with some of the things that he's done, and that's fair and fine. He's got a lot of different issues here that he has to, kind of balance. But I personally, I think that Joe Biden needs to listen to UAW leadership, and he should be, and his people I know are in contact with UAW leadership. I know Acting Secretary of Labor Julie Su, who has a very, very good labor record, to the point that, she's only an acting secretary because, corporate leaders in the Senate don't want to confirm her because they're scared of her, is in Detroit, talking to people. And I think that Biden needs to say, look, I want to support the UAW. I want to do this in an intelligent way. Let's have a conversation with UAW leadership on what I can do. And I think that he's done some good things. He said some good things, but I'm not sure that UAW membership really buys it. So, I think that, among the things that he can do is not only to speak out against some of the corporate greed that's going on, but to try to put his thumb on the scale a bit about building the electric vehicles in union plants. I think that's really important. There's been all these incentives to build electric vehicles, but I think, frankly, that Biden's labor people and Biden's environmental people are not necessarily talking to each other. And so you have this deal that came out that did not really mandate or really try to, even if they can't mandate it, try to shape it a little bit to really incentivize the building of these EVs in union plants. And I think that was an error. And Biden's going to need to figure out how to fix that, because he needs to do something really strong, I think, to signal to not only UAW members, but to the American working class that he is their representative in Washington and not Donald Trump.
No, it's going to be interesting to see where this plays out. Eric, as always, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Again, the book, A History of America in 10 Strikes, written by Eric Loomis. This is a must read, and it has to be on your bookshelf. Eric, appreciate the time, man.
As always, much appreciated.
Thanks so much, our good friend Eric Loomis. Again, the book. Make sure you get the book. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We've been farming the same farm for 3 generations, and it's just always been where I've wanted to be. Any farmer you talk to in Montana will tell you that the climate is definitely changing. The weather is way more extreme. We went from the wettest year we've ever had to this year with the worst drought we've had since the 80s. We've done everything we can to keep water going, but it got close to running out. Farmers can't afford the cost of climate change. Congress has to get this done.
The best way to strengthen America's economy? How about investing in America's fastest growing industry? Clean energy. It means millions of jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced. And lower utility costs for families. Congress, let's get it done.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind? I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, let's wrap up today by a little victory. You may remember last week we beat up on Drew Barrymore a little bit. Drew was restarting her talk show and, scabbing. And we called it out, called her for what she was at that moment, a scab, and said, don't do it, Drew. Stop. Just don't do it. Well, it worked. Drew Barrymore has announced that, on social media, she said, I have listened to everyone, and I am making the decision to pause the show's premiere until the strike is over. I have no words to express my deepest apologies to anyone I have hurt, and of course, to the incredible team who work on the show and has made it what it is today. We really tried to find our way forward. I truly hope for a resolution for the entire industry very soon. Still kind of miffed, but a little redemption. Her rambling 4-minute video, I don't think did what she was hoping it would do, but to her credit, and I give her credit where credit is due, much like Jennifer Hudson, who announced she was coming back but has changed her mind. Good on you for at least being somewhat decent. Now the hope is that there is some resolution to the strike and the workers get what they need to survive and to thrive. But I want to thank them. I want to thank you for tuning in. You miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.